Thank you for joining me today on Paint a Beautiful Picture. This is episode number 204, A Spirit of Cooperation. You ever tried working along someone who doesn't have any capacity to cooperate? It's like this, and it needs to be like this, and I don't care what you say, I'm not doing that, and they don't want to hear any of your ideas. They don't want your input. They don't want your help, frankly. They'd rather you just disappeared from in front of their face, and they'll handle it just fine. Except they don't. And it's really challenging within a household when this goes on. Let me describe a situation to you that I have seen multiple times, actually, and heard about occasionally in counseling. A guy works all day. Frankly, he's tired. He's dealt with all kinds of nonsense. And guys only have so many words. They tend to be far less verbal than women. So they've used up all their words, and they walk in the door, and they would like to have some peace and quiet and the opportunity to enjoy their family and enjoy their home. But they walk in the door, and their wife has had a really bad day, and the kids have been really bad, and no one has been cooperative. So the house is a wreck, like a tornado went through, and nothing is prepared for dinner, and she doesn't even know what's for dinner. She hasn't thought that far. Their laundry is piled up across the couch, and there's cereal still all over the kitchen floor. The dog is dirty because he got through a mud puddle. I mean, it's just ridiculous. The guy wants to go sit in his man cave and have 5 minutes of peace and quiet, and his wife wants him to just take over the kids for a few minutes because she can hardly stand it, and she needs 3 minutes to breathe. And let's be truthful, no one's going to get just what they want without a lot of bad feelings later on someone's part, and it's just not very pleasant in the entire household because of it. So is there an answer to this dilemma? And I would say to you, oh yes, there is. There is a short-term answer, a mid-range answer, and definitely a long-term answer. Okay. The short-term answer is this. Acknowledge that really lousy days happen, because lands, they do, in every household. The most well-managed, organized, scheduled human being has really terrible bad days occasionally where everything in the world goes insane, nothing works correctly, and they just happen. So acknowledge that really terrible bad days occasionally occur. Next, I want you to know that all of your expectations are seldom going to be met. I mean, it might happen once or twice a year. And so realistically, if you think that the kids are going to be really great today, and I'm going to get this done, and I'm going to get this done, and this will happen, or as the guy, I've had a really terrible day, I'm going to walk in the door, and the kids are going to be clean and ready to say hello, and dinner's going to be baking, and it's going to smell wonderful, and I'm going to get a minute to hug and kiss my wife, and then sit down for 10 minutes. How often does that happen? Yeah, you have realistic expectations that everything is not going to be stellar all the time. Okay, and you enjoy it when it is, and you deal with it when it is not. And in the short term, you do not blow up at the other person because your expectations were not met. So as a wife, you don't yell and scream at your husband because he's had one of the most horrific days ever and he's not ready to take over and he needs 5 or 10 minutes to regroup before he takes over. And for the husband, you're not going to yell and be upset with your wife because she didn't get anything done today. And what do you mean you don't know what's for dinner? And oh my word, woman, do you have any idea the kind of day I had? And then I have to walk in the door and handle this. Okay, so it isn't going to solve anything. It isn't going to help anyone. And it's going to add to the chaos. Don't do it as much as you want to or you're tempted to. Everything isn't going to go the way that you dreamt of it in your mind or the way that you hoped it would. Accept it. You're an adult and handle it. You're an adult. And talk about it all later, not in front of the kids, because they really don't need to hear this. All right, that's the short term. In the mid-range, you say, so when we have a day like this, honey, so you're the guy and you're talking to your wife, you need to let me know. Like maybe 2 or 2:30 in the afternoon. Just send me a text and say, it's been the worst day in a long time and I don't even know what's for dinner. So maybe I could stop on the way home and grab a pizza. And then I know in my mind I'm not going to walk into a great situation at the house. And so I'm mentally prepared. That's very fair. Sweetheart, if you're having a really bad day, husband at work, or wives, let's be real, sometimes there are guys who stay home. I know that. My son was one of them. You send a text and say, this has just been the most horrific day in forever. When I get home, I am not going to be able to help you with the kids for a few minutes. I need a little bit of regroup time all by myself. I'll be glad to hug and kiss you at the door, but then please let me alone. Please don't dump everything about your day on me. Just let me have this. In other words, have a system in place of communication so that both of you are aware of what the other one went through that day on a horrible day and discuss ahead of time what that might mean. So if your wife is the one who's a high-powered executive and she's got all this junk to deal with and she sends this message that it was just horrific, 15 minutes before she comes home, run her a bubble bath. If your husband's had the most horrific day ever and I don't know, whatever. Guys have so many different tastes. He would just love for you to hand him a cold beer in his hand and hug and kiss him and tell him go sit down somewhere, or he'd like you to rub his back for 5 minutes. Whatever that is, make sure that that's in place and ready to go when they get home. In other words, respond to the need of their life, that they had this horrific, horrible, really bad day. If you're the one at work and your spouse lets you know there's just been a really horrible day at home with the kids, you know, three of them puked all over everything and you're trying to deal with that, and then the next one writes magic marker down the wall and you're trying to deal with that. You barely got them fed anything. Just okay, so you let them know that this has just been awful and I don't have dinner ready, and so your spouse then can grab a pizza or swing by Kentucky Fried Chicken and buy a bucket of chicken and come home somewhat mentally and emotionally prepared for the fact that you aren't your regular self and it wasn't a good day and they're going to be supportive to you. So the mid-range plan is to develop a plan, develop thoughts, have a discussion about what it looks like when it's a really tough or really bad day. The long-range plan is pretty comprehensive, and I'm going to do my best to give it to you in a manner that it is succinct and actionable. In other words, you're really going to be able to do something about this. Okay. Especially if this happens reasonably often. And I mean by reasonably often, at least once a week or 5 or 6 times a month. Yeah, that's quite a lot of chaos, so you know. And so that means that together you need to make a long-range plan to deal with that. If you're overscheduled, mom, your kids have dance, they have music, they have baseball, they have basketball, they have horseback riding, they have a private tutor for math. Great Scott. Get a hold of your calendar and start getting rid of more things than any human being needs. And so develop a schedule that is manageable. Okay. Get your support system in place. So you have 4 or 5 children and 2 of them are sick. Pretty soon everybody in the world's going to be sick. If your mom doesn't work, or your mate's mom doesn't work, or their daddy, somebody that you really trust with the kids, you need to be able to call them up by 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning and say, listen, I have a couple of horrifically sick kids here. You don't need to be exposed to them necessarily, but I need you, please, to take the other kids today so that they can get to their lessons, they can have a regular life today, because I'm not going to be able to manage all of this, and get your support system actively at work for you on those days. This is why this is long range planning, because once you've had this discussion with your folks and they know you're not doing this to them every week, but on occasion when you really need it, they're right there and they're supportive and available, that makes a big difference. When you're the one at work and you have this horrible bad day, you say, on my way home, I'm not going to go get wasted, or I'm not, going to smoke a joint and be messed up and not be any help to anybody, but I am going to go drive around for half an hour and process this. or I'm going to go bowl one game, which is about another half of an hour. Give yourself a half an hour or so to just come down off of that really bad day. Do something that's relaxing to you. Maybe you're just going to go sit in the library and read. That's what I would be doing. But I'm going to take this time, so I won't be home at the regular time. I need you to know that. I'll be much calmer when I walk in the door, and I'll be prepared to handle this and help you out. Then you need to have a long-range plan. In that, you say, these are the non-negotiables of our life, whatever those may be. I'm going to share with you one more time what I did when my kids were little boys. Of course, they played hard, and they were dirty and sweaty, and oh my lands, we really played. About a half of an hour before my husband would come home, I would give my kids a bath. I would put clean clothes on them. I would set them down with a book. I made dessert every day of our lives. It's just who I was. And so I would throw in a batch of cookies, or I would make sure the timing of it, that the cake or the cupcakes or whatever were just about done, and dinner was already on that stove. So when he walked in the door, he got to see the boys, and they were clean, and they smelled great, and they were relaxed, and they were ready to have fun with him. He could smell something cooking in the house. And I always met him at the door and hugged and kissed him. It sets the tone for the rest of the evening, no matter what. Whoever's at home, and I acknowledge to you, sometimes nobody's home, so this is the challenge, but whoever is home, they need to have this set in place. In other words, this is a consistent part of life. And it's not so easy in the beginning. I've shared this with people, and they're like, yeah, this will never happen. And it might take a couple of months for them to sort of get in the groove of this was how it was going to be. But if you're one of these young persons listening to me, thinking about what your life will be like someday when you have children, or you're a very young parent, this is something manageable to go ahead and put in place right now, so that as your mate comes in the door, the tone of the evening is already established in the home. It is an amazing difference in how your life will go. Now, granted, again, on those chaotic, crazy, all bets are off kind of days, that's not going to happen. And everyone's liable to be a little out of frame that night. But once you have something very consistently in place that's going on, it's really orderly, and it always helps the whole entire household to run better. The last thing I'm going to say to you is be supportive. It's tough when we come in and our expectations aren't being met, and our needs aren't being met, and our mate's frustrations are through the roof already. And then it's hard to come in there and be calm and be patient, be gracious, be helpful, be cooperative. But when you have fostered a spirit of cooperation between you, you learn how to do that. You also need to foster that spirit of cooperation in your children. That is the idea of all of this. So when you show them that things are not the way you wanted or the way you expected, but you can still cooperate together in getting things done, they need to understand they are part of the equation, and they need to cooperate as well. We're going to keep addressing this a little bit more tomorrow, just so you know. I'm going to wrap this part of it up, and I would welcome your comments, your questions, your suggestions. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up and send the link to a friend. And I will look forward to seeing you very soon again on Paint a Beautiful Picture. You may find additional information on our paintabeautifulpicture.com website. Additionally, you may watch me on Rumble, and you may also listen to a podcast on Buzzsprout or Spreaker, all under the name Paint a Beautiful Picture. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. You may subscribe, and if you are interested in receiving notifications, please hit the notifications button.